The last thing Li Wei felt was the cold seep of the mortar. It was autumn, 1573, and the wind slicing down from the steppes carried the promise of a killing frost. He was a conscripted farmer, his hands now torn and bloody from hauling stone slabs, heavier than his own ox. The foreman had just passed, his eyes lingering on the shaky section of battlement Li Wei's team had built. A rumour had been slithering through the camp for days, a terrifying whisper, that to appease the mountain spirits and strengthen the wall, the weakest section would be sealed, with its builders still inside. Li Wei looked at the crumbling mortar in his hand, then at the dark, swallowing shadow of the unfinished watchtower. He was not just building a wall, he was becoming a potential offering to it. What was the true price of the Great Wall of China? We are not talking about silver, or stone, or timber. We are talking about the currency of human souls. This was not a single project, but a millennia-long campaign of fortification, a serpent of stone stretched across the spine of a continent by the command of emperors. Its purpose was absolute: to separate the Celestial Empire from the barbarian hordes, to be an immutable line between civilization and chaos. But for the millions of men, soldiers, peasants, convicts, dragged from their lives to this brutal frontier, the war was not a symbol of glory. It was a slow, grinding machine of death. The stakes here were the most fundamental imaginable: survival versus the anonymous, miserable end. Your body lost to the elements or, as the grimmest legends suggest, entombed forever within the very stones you were forced to lay. To understand how a man could become a component of his own construction, we must first comprehend the immense, impersonal power that demanded it. The wall, particularly during the Ming Dynasty's frantic rebuilding, was a project of existential panic. Emperors like Hongji and Wanli issued edicts that echoed with divine mandate, mobilizing a vast, desperate army of labor. But this was not an army of volunteers. It was assembled from the dregs and the disposable. Peasants like Li Wei, conscripted from their fields under a system of corvée labor, torn from their families for years or forever. Criminals, political dissidents, and scholars who had fallen from grace offered a grim choice: service on the wall or execution. They were marched hundreds of miles, shackled and starving, to the northern frontier, a place known to them only as the end of the world. Their existence upon arrival was a perpetual state of torment. They worked from dawn until the light failed, hauling massive granite blocks with primitive ropes and ramps, mixing mortar with their bare hands in freezing temperatures. Food was scant and often rotten. Clean water was a luxury. Disease, dysentery, typhoid, pneumonia ripped through the crowded, filthy camps with the efficiency of a plague. The bodies of those who succumbed were often simply rolled down the mountainside into ravines or tossed into makeshift pits, their graves unmarked. The wall was a predator, and it was fed a continuous diet of human misery. The scale of this suffering is almost impossible to comprehend from the comfort of the present, isn't it? To ensure you don't miss the full, shocking truth of what we're about to uncover, make sure you subscribe to Forgotten Asia. We are just beginning to unearth the secrets buried in this stone. But just when you think the historical reality of neglect and mass graves is grim enough, we confront the persistent, chilling legend. The story that workers weren't just discarded beside the wall, but incorporated into it. This was not a random folk tale. It emerged from a specific, calculated atmosphere of terror. The question we must ask is not merely, did it happen? But why did this particular horror take such a powerful hold? The answer lies not in archaeology, but in the psychology of absolute power and the desperate need for the oppressed to explain the inexplicable. The construction process itself was a symphony of suffering, each movement composed to grind down the human spirit. The logistics were a nightmare of imperial ambition. Quarries miles away supplied the stone, transported by men dragging sledges across impossible terrain. The mortar, a crucial component for durability, was a concoction of lime, clay, and, often, whatever was available. Contemporary accounts and later analyses would suggest the use of sticky rice flour to strengthen the mix, a testament to engineering ingenuity. But in the minds of the starving, broken labourers, what else might be strengthening the wall? What secret, terrible ingredient would give the structure its rumoured spiritual resilience? The overseers, answerable only to distant, ruthless bureaucrats, maintained discipline through an economy of violence. Whippings for working too slowly, mutilation for petty theft, execution for desertion. The body of the attempted escapee would be left on a spike as a graphic warning to others. In this environment, where life was cheaper than a single perfectly cut stone, the idea that a man could be rendered down into a structural component did not seem far-fetched. It was merely the final, logical extreme of a system that viewed them as disposable biomass. This was a world devoid of mercy, where the groans of the wounded mingled with the ceaseless hammering of chisels. The very geography was an enemy. The precipitous cliffs, the scorching summers, the winters that froze skin to metal. Men died from falls, from exhaustion, from infected wounds. They died silently in their sleep, their bodies stiff and cold by morning. The wall did not need to actively swallow them. They were offered up to it by the relentless, crushing machinery of its creation. Their spirits, it was believed, became part of the wall's essence, forever bound to the stone they were forced to raise. The layers of this history are as complex as the wall's own construction. If you're starting to grasp the terrifying reality behind this ancient wonder, please take a second to like this video. It tells the algorithm you're engaged and helps these forgotten stories reach a wider audience. And then, from this cauldron of human agony, a specific, heartbreaking story crystallized, one that would immortalize the suffering in China's cultural memory. It is the tale of Meng Jiangnu. Her story is not one of literal entombment, but something perhaps even more devastating. A love so profound that its loss could make the heavens weep and the very wall itself crack open in grief. Her legend is the key to understanding why the myth of the buried builder is not just a ghost story, but a profound historical metaphor. The legend tells of a young woman, Meng Jiangnu, whose husband, Fan Xiliang, was conscripted and sent to the wall soon after their wedding. For years, she heard nothing. Then, as winter approached, she embarked on an epic, solitary journey to bring him warm clothes. After traversing countless miles of treacherous country, she finally arrived at the colossal, intimidating frontier. But when she asked after her husband, she was met with evasive stares and cold silence. Fan Xiliang was dead. Like so many others, he had perished from exhaustion, and his body had been cast into one of the countless trenches lining the construction site. Upon hearing this, Meng Jiangnu did not simply weep. She collapsed against the ramparts and wailed for 3 days and 3 nights. Her grief was so raw, so powerful, that it moved the heavens to pity. The skies darkened, and a storm of unnatural fury erupted. When the tempest finally subsided, a massive section of the Great Wall, the very section under which her husband's bones lay, had crumbled to dust, revealing the skeletons of the countless dead buried beneath. In some versions, she finds his bones by a test of fidelity, the blood from her finger soaking into his remains alone. This story is not a historical account, but it is a historical document of a different kind. It is the crystallized voice of millions. It speaks of the widows left behind, the families shattered by the state's insatiable demand for labor. Meng Jiangnu's tears are the collective tears of a nation. The wall cracking symbolizes that no imperial edict, no matter how powerful, could ultimately withstand the force of true human emotion. The legend provided a form of cosmic justice, a catharsis that the real world never offered. It confirmed what every laborer and every grieving family knew in their hearts, that the wall was indeed a tomb. The conversation around these stories is always fascinating. What do you think? Was the legend a form of psychological resistance? Share your perspective in the comments below. I read them all. So we arrive at the crucial, chilling crossroads between legend and forensics. If the wall was truly a colossal tomb, where is the physical evidence? The archaeological record presents a profound silence. No excavations have revealed skeletons neatly stacked within the masonry. But this absence of proof is not proof of absence. It leads us to a far more disturbing and historically verifiable conclusion. The reality of the burial was not a neat ritualistic entombment, but something far more chaotic and brutal. A truth that makes the legend seem almost merciful. Modern archaeology and a sober reading of historical texts point not to interment within the wall, but to systematic disposal alongside it. The wall is not just a line of stone, it is the centerpiece of a vast linear graveyard. The mountains and ravines that cradle its path are, in effect, catacombs. The labor was so relentless, the mortality rate so catastrophically high, that the logistical problem of corpse disposal became a constant, grim necessity. Mass graves, or 10,000-man pits, as they were sometimes called, were dug parallel to the construction. These were not hallowed grounds, but functional trenches where bodies were unceremoniously dumped, layered with quicklime to accelerate decomposition and prevent disease. In this light, the buried alive legend transforms. It was not a literal description, but a powerful, metaphorical, and psychological truth. To be worked to death on the wall and thrown into an anonymous pit was to be erased. Your name, your story, your very physical existence was removed from the world and covered by earth, just as surely as if you had been sealed behind stone. You were buried by the wall, not in it. Your body became part of the foundational sacrifice upon which the empire's great symbol stood. The legend was the poetic, terrifying expression of this absolute, final obliteration. Furthermore, there is a macabre physical plausibility to the myth. In the frantic, sloppy work of construction, especially in remote, poorly supervised sections, it is not difficult to imagine a laborer, dead or dying from a fall or collapse, being simply covered over by the next layer of stone and mortar rather than being laboriously extracted. This wouldn't be ritual, it would be brutal convenience. The wall, in its immense, indifferent bulk, could easily have absorbed such individual tragedies without a trace, making the legend a plausible horror born from countless, unrecorded accidents. The layers of history are often darker than the legends themselves. We're committed to bringing these uncomfortable truths to light. If you value this deep dive, consider sharing this video with a friend who loves history. It truly helps us grow. But the emperors and their overseers were master psychologists. They understood that a controlled narrative could be a more powerful tool than any whip. And herein lies the most calculating aspect of this entire dark saga. The distinct possibility that the rumour of live burials was not just a story that emerged from the workers, but one that was subtly encouraged, or at the very least tolerated, by those in power. Think about it from the perspective of the state. You have hundreds of thousands of disenfranchised, miserable men toiling on a project of vital importance. The potential for sabotage, desertion, or even organised revolt was a constant looming threat. How do you maintain control? Through sheer numbers of guards? Impossible. You control them through fear. The story that a lazy or rebellious worker could be immured within the wall, his spirit trapped forever, was a terrifyingly effective deterrent. It gave the wall itself a kind of monstrous, watchful consciousness. It was no longer just stone. It was a potential predator. This was terror as an administrative tool. The legend served the state's interest by supernaturalizing the consequences of disobedience. A guard could only kill you, but the wall could damn you to an eternity of cold, silent confinement. This belief system transformed the wall from a passive project into an active, menacing entity. It fostered a pervasive, low-grade terror that was far more efficient and cost-effective than stationing a soldier behind every labourer. The fear of a supernatural, eternal punishment often holds more power than the fear of a quick, physical one. This practice of using macabre legends to enforce discipline has echoes across history, but on the Great Wall, it was perfected. The myth provided a spiritual justification for the unimaginable suffering, framing it not as mere imperial cruelty, but as a necessary, if horrific, sacrifice for the stability of the empire itself. It coerced complicity by wrapping exploitation in the cloak of destiny and cosmic significance. The workers were not just building a wall, they were participating in a sacred, if terrifying, ritual to protect the Middle Kingdom. As we piece together this puzzle of stone and suffering, I'm curious, where are you watching from? The story of the Great Wall is a global fascination. Drop a comment with your country. It's always fascinating to see where these histories find a home. And just when you believe this story is confined to the history books, a startling scientific revelation connects this ancient tragedy directly to our modern world. A 2015 genetics study revealed a fascinating demographic pattern along the corridor of the Great Wall. It suggests that the mass, forced migration of men from central China to the northern frontier left a permanent biological signature on the region's population. The ghosts of the builders, it seems, did not entirely vanish. They left a trace in the very bloodlines of their descendants. So, we arrive at the haunting climax of our investigation. The Great Wall of China stands not as a tomb containing skeletons, but as a monument to a system that consumed human life with the same indifference as it consumed stone and mortar. The real burial was not a physical act of walling people in, but the systematic, bureaucratic erasure of their individuality, their futures, and their memory. They were buried by poverty, by imperial decree, by disease, and by the sheer crushing weight of the project itself. The legend of the buried builder is therefore not a falsehood. It is a profound and painful truth, distilled into a potent, mythological image. It's the collective nightmare of the millions who understood, in their bones, that they were being sacrificed. Their bodies might have filled the ravines, but their stories, their fear, and their profound despair became the spiritual mortar that holds the legend together. The wall is indeed haunted, not by spectres that rattle chains, but by the echoing silence of those who were utterly erased to create an icon. The Great Wall endures as a dual symbol, one of breathtaking human achievement and the other of unimaginable human cost. It forces us to ask a difficult question. Can we truly admire the grandeur without acknowledging the suffering baked into its very foundations? The ghosts of the wall do not ask for our fear. They ask for our remembrance. They are the eternal reminder that history's greatest wonders are often built on foundations of forgotten sorrow. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, that the echoes of the forgotten should be heard, then your place is with us. Subscribe to Forgotten Asia and ring the notification bell. Together we will continue to give a voice to those that history tried to silence.